on to further fallout from the NATO summit. I mean, we've got to bring this image on screen because Rishi Sunak was very keen for everybody to see that on his Twitter feed this morning, or at least 10 Downing Street was. It's a loving picture. It's so touching. It's a really tender moment. It's beautiful. Yes. So for those only listening and not watching, Rishi and Mr. Zelensky are giving themselves a good hug there. It's very pleasant. But you might be giving him financial advice. You might be whispering in Zelensky's ear about investment opportunities overseas. Who knows? Could be, but it wasn't all smelling of roses at the NATO summit. Not at all, Mike. Not at all. We're going to call this a fear and loathing in Vilnius, and there was quite a bit of that this year. So remember before the summit, you remember Jens Stoltenberg? NATO has never been more united, right? When you hear politicians say this, you know that they've never been more disunited. Yeah. So Zelensky was basically accused of not being grateful for the generosity of his Western sponsors here. Here he is with his number one sugar daddy, Joe Biden. And so Zelensky had a Twitter tirade, an angry tweet, accusing this of being absurd. They haven't given him fast-track membership to NATO. Like he was expecting some big announcement. It didn't arrive. And this was this sort of pattern of disappointment, Mike. This was a general theme for Ukraine. So they've given them what do they call it? The NATO Council. What was it? The NATO Council pathway, right? Which is a pathway to nowhere. They say when the war's over, then we'll get you back on track. But at the same time, NATO members are saying we want to keep the war going. No peace negotiations. So he's caught in his own sort of trap. There were signs of a bit of impatience on the Western side. So we had this quote, this was apparently said sort of to the sidelines to journalists by Ben Wallace. The UK is not an Amazon-style weapons delivery service for Ukraine, because he was being asked about this by these journalists, asked about Zelensky's being upset. But we have a tweet here from Che Bose. Che Bose, Irish journalist. He also reports for RT. And this is one of those iconic images there. You've probably seen the dejected, the family photo, and Zelensky's there, and I call him Action Man, or the Little Green Man. They're starting to call him the Little Green Man now. So Che Bose, Irish journalist, saying he's talking about Biden and Zelensky. One's banned all opposition. He's talking about Zelensky. The other's trying to jail his. That's Biden. One's canceled elections. That's Zelensky. The other pays him billions. That's Biden. One's a corrupt actor playing the president. I don't know which one. I think that's Zelensky. And the other reads instructions from cue cards and is obviously demented. That's Biden. These are the guardians of freedom at Vilnius here. So Biden, you can see doing his typical turning, shaking hands with a ghost, yes, probably. And Zelensky's off there as a prop off to the side. I mean, the green outfit is getting ridiculous. Like, when is he going to show up dressed like a head of state and not like Manuel Noriega? And this is the problem with the whole Zelensky shtick, is just getting a little bit long in the tooth. It's been 18 months. Buy a suit, get a tie, do something. But the green outfit, or the rotating green outfits, it's kind of getting old. The whole shtick's getting old. Which brings us on to France. Well, this was a big announcement that Macron made in Vilnius here, that France was, note the date, Mike, July 11th. France was going to supply, they're going to supply their long-range SCALP cruise missiles to the Ukraine. Now, it was a big, now Russia's obviously reading this as an escalation, okay? So SCALP missiles, people don't know much about them. What are they? Well, they're actually the same as the Storm Shadow missiles. It's the same manufacturer, in fact, here. So here's Macron making this big announcement a couple of days ago, but it turns out that the French missiles are already in Ukraine. They're already in Ukraine. So a little bit of a naughty move there by Macron, and they've arguably been in Ukraine quite a long time. In fact, they've been in Ukraine since Ben Wallace announced that they'll be sending Storm Shadow missiles to the Ukrainians. Why? Because the SCALP missile and the Storm Shadow are the same. It's the same exact product. So here you can see this is the SCALP stroke Storm Shadow missile, which is manufactured by MBDA. They're basically a French manufacturer. It's a joint venture between BAE Systems and Airbus and Leonardo as a sort of junior partner there. So let's take a look at this. And
Here's the problem, Mike. Here's the problem. These missiles are now being shot down and intercepted, and they're being studied by the Russians here. So this was in Berdyansk. This is near Mariupol, down sort of in that part of the Donbass. So this is one of those Storm Shadow missiles here, apparently, but we'll take a closer look at this. This is Ukraine Weapons Tracker. The Russian anti-aircraft shot this down. MBDA, France. That's the missile inside of the casing, okay? So you can see the casings all look the same. It's that big gray body. So this is a French missile. This was shot down. This was a few days ago. So they're already sort of intercepting these Russian anti-aircraft here. And let's just take a look at this. Even more interesting is this. This was, I believe, July 8th. You can see this was actually recovered before the date on this, by the way. It was tweeted later. So Russian officials have successfully recovered a fully intact Storm Shadow missile. The same thing as a SCALP. It's the same exact product here, cruise missile. And so now they're inspecting the guidance systems and probably doing some work on these, Mike, on the technical side. So let's just take a look here. We got a little bit of a blow up. So this is them unloading. You can see there is the body of the missile there. These are Russian military technicians taking the pieces of this, and they're going to be transporting this back to the Russian MOD to study all the guidance systems in order to align their electronic warfare. So that might be a slight problem, maybe.
Yes, indeed.
For the British and the French. So yeah, that's what's going on there. So let's just take a look. MBDA, there they are. I believe the manufacturing is in Bourges in France. And I believe the avionics and the engineering is in Stevenage, Mike, for this particular company here. Again, a joint venture with BAE Systems, Airbus, and Leonardo. So yes, it's the same exact missile.
Yes. Okay. So coming back to the Ukraine, to the NATO summit itself, of course, Rishi Sunak very keen to tweet out afterwards, NATO is where Ukraine belongs, because, of course, as you say, Zelensky very upset that he didn't get what he wanted there, which was NATO membership. So they threw the dog a bone, or we should say a consolation prize, and that was the G7 declaration for support on Ukraine. So the leaders reaffirmed their unwavering commitment to the strategic objective of a free, independent, democratic, and sovereign Ukraine. Yeah, that's all very exciting. So where does that take us? Well, it takes us to Biden approving mobilization of reserves, because, of course, we've got to send the message to Ukraine that we're still supporting them.
Yeah, so the G7 announcement, Mike, that's public relations, as you said. That's all that is. That was just to reassure the European partners and Ukraine. They haven't completely left them in the lurch, even though support for Ukraine and for this proxy war is wavering and rapidly in Europe and also in the United States. So here's another PR move. Biden approving the mobilization. Gets a lot of big press out of this. It's a big announcement. CNN's running it. But what are we looking at in terms of the details? Well, look in there. 3,000 personnel augmenting the armed forces in support of Operation Atlantic Resolve.
So, I mean, on the scale of the U.S. military, that's nothing.
On the scale of the Russian military, it's nothing.
Right.
If you consider the mobilization right now, Russia have 750,000. They're going to be up to 1.2 million. They want to be by the fall. Putin said he wants to go up to 1.5 in 2024. So they're talking about 3,000 troops. What is this? This is a desperate PR announcement. That's the only thing I can say that we can take from this, Mike. So those are two back-to-back kind of little consolation announcements. This is a disaster. Like yes. This NATO summit has been an unmitigated disaster, but we got more on this.
Well, we got more. So we're going to apologize straight now for putting Rishi Sunak on screen. But speaking of PR disasters, let's have a look at this.
Together with our G7 partners, we have agreed to provide the long-term bilateral security commitments that Ukraine needs. These commitments mark a new high point in international support for Ukraine. And I want to be clear, they are not a substitute for NATO membership. The summit communique echoes the UK's long-held position that Ukraine's future is in NATO. And finally, I'd like to say a word about the UK's role here. I was struck once again this week by just how valued our contribution is. The British people should know that, and they should be proud. We are the leading European contributor to NATO. We were one of the first to hit the 2% target, and now we're moving towards 2.5%. We spend more than 20 other NATO countries combined, but it's about much more than that. We're one of the only countries that contributes to every NATO mission, with RAF jets patrolling the eastern flank, troops on the ground in Estonia and Poland as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence, and the Royal Navy, including our 2 aircraft carriers, providing around a quarter of NATO's maritime capability.
So, Patrick, you'll have noticed how he just lied with a straight face there. 2 aircraft carriers. We do not have 2 aircraft carriers. We have 1 aircraft carrier plus another aircraft carrier that's in dry dock in the Firth of Forth. And they're currently butchering that aircraft carrier to get spare parts for the first aircraft carrier. So we do not have 2 aircraft carriers. We've got 1.5 at best. So anyway, but aside from that, the point here is 2.5% of GDP. Well, as you just said while he was saying that, 2.5% of a shrinking GDP means nothing.
And adjusted for inflation.
But this is PR again. So let's just look at what the Russian response was to this PR, because this is from the UK, the embassy in the UK, the Russian embassy in the UK. So they're saying, we took note of recent statements by UK leadership where London urges allies to steadily increase their military spending, adapt NATO's military planning and structure, build up rapid response capabilities across every domain, stresses the importance of adequate defence industry management to ensure the possibility of significantly ramping up military production, boasts its own notorious obligation to provide long-term military support to Kiev regime, coupled with the policy of dragging out the Ukrainian conflict. It's clear that the UK is in fact openly calling for the militarization of the European continent, a regional arms race, and setting the stage for long-term Russia-West confrontation with serious risk of escalation. That's their position on it, and I think that's quite reasonable.
That should be a point of concern as well, diplomatically, and it goes to show you that NATO is really the United States and Britain, and everybody else is a junior partner along for the way. I'm just going to say quickly, right before we go on, watching Rishi Sunak as a statesman, we're looking for those qualities, right? I mean, I think we sold Theresa May really short. She's like 3 times the statesman as Rishi Sunak. Bring back strong and stable Theresa May. She was like Thatcher compared to this guy. I mean, it's pretty shocking.
Well, it is shocking how far down the plug hole we've already fallen. But anyway, in the meantime, Scott Ritter's had some comments on this, on Britain's role specifically.
He has. Scott Ritter has produced a stunning investigative series. I have to say, very rarely do you see pieces of media like this, Mike. Ukraine on Fire is a good example of a real seminal piece. Scott Ritter's got this investigative series. Part 1 was released this week. The title is Agent Zelensky. So we featured the first installment up at 21stCenturyWire.com. YouTube's put an 18 and over block on his embed on his Substack, but in terms of Rumble and stuff like that, we embedded the Rumble video here. Scott Ritter Extra is on Rumble if you can watch it there as well. This, Mike, is a great piece of journalism. I have to take my hat off to Scott Ritter. This is hugely impactful. Now, he really focuses on the role of British intelligence, specifically in episode 1. We're only giving you a few short clips. This first episode is unbelievable. I'm rarely floored by some journalistic work like this. This is like almost, very impactful. Let's just put it that way. Let's watch this first part of the clip.
And all of this is part of the payment for Zelensky's hard work as an agent serving America and the British Crown.
We had a meeting at the MI6 office. Unfortunately, I can't disclose all the information. It's a matter of state affairs.
Autumn 2020. Ukrainian media accidentally, or maybe not, learned about Zelensky's secret meeting with Richard Moore, the head of MI6. Not just anywhere, but at the headquarters of British intelligence service. According to the president, the meeting was about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. As a Secret Service agent, I'd like to tell you that there are special norms of decency and protocol. When a president of a sovereign country is on a foreign territory, he should meet with his counterpart. The only exception is if the head of intelligence himself comes to Ukraine to meet with Zelensky.
Coming down to the lowest level, to the head of the intelligence agency, is not a simple admission of guilt. At that time, the person becomes an actual professional agent. It is clear. One handler always works with one agent. In the case of Zelensky, the head of MI6, Richard Moore, became his direct handler.
That's quite an allegation.
That is a big allegation, okay, and he backs it up with receipts, okay, and this is just part one. Now, the other thing he's pointed out was Zelensky's security detail, and Scott Ritter is saying they're British. His close security protection, much like the Saudi royal family, they're British special forces. So let's watch this next part.
He was surrounded by British security. This was in the spring of 2022, in the midst of war in Bucha. Look at these scenes. Do you see a patch on the sleeve of one of the guys near Zelensky?
Я думаю, ми навіть з вами не можемо розглядати можливість. Не можемо.
The Ukrainian flag is upside down. A local would have been shot on the spot for this. But this guy is okay. Do you know why? Because he has the right to. He is a foreigner, like everyone else around Zelensky. In fact, judging by their pronunciation, they're British.
As we can see, Zelensky's security team consists of Brits. Quite marvelous, because we have the so-called Ninth Administration, the President's security, with 1,800 professional military guys, special forces.
I don't know what to say to that. If it's true, it is, well, the British government has some questions to answer.
What was more shocking was what happened right before that clip, which we didn't show, and I just say to everybody, go watch the full episode on that. Now, the last part was his visit to the Pope, Zelensky's visit to the Pope, and everybody saw the Holy Mother kind of illuminated manuscript type painting with the blacked out Jesus, which is satanic. Okay, that got a free pass in the mainstream media, which is what Zelensky presented to the Pope. Okay, I mean, that's shocking enough. Ritter comments on that. But what was interesting, who is the head of foreign affairs for the Holy See? Is British. So Scott Ritter says that this is likely another British agent handling Zelensky in this particular instance. Go ahead and roll this.
The central communication of Zelensky took place not in the Pope's office, but in the next room, without the involvement of Pope Francis, but with the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Holy See, Archbishop Paul Richard Gallagher, a native Brit whose cardinals are conducting powerful propaganda in Ukraine. The Ukrainian president spoke with Gallagher for almost an hour and a half. But the main detail is that the head of MI6, Richard Moore, was also present at the meeting in the Vatican. Maybe this fact explains the record-breaking motorcade of the leader of independent Ukraine, over 20 cars.
To be sure that that guy do not make a trick to suddenly make a peace with Vladimir Putin, they take hostages his kids and a wife in Great Britain. This is another layer of security for masters of puppets.
So the implication there was that Zelensky couldn't freelance and maybe make some peace-type overture statement directly to the Pope. They're very careful not to allow for those types of opportunities. And the Igor Lepotnak, who's the film director, is also Ukraine on Fire with Oliver Stone. He's made quite a few other great films on this. He's saying that Zelensky's wife and kids in London as collateral at the same time he's visiting the Pope. That's the implication. This is heavy implications, but it's quite an extraordinary scene when you look at what they're showing here.
Yes.
I mean, there's some explaining to do there. So Agent Zelensky, is he being handled by the British and the Americans? I mean, really micromanaged.
Yes.
That's what they're showing here. Listen, this is a really stunning piece of film. And this is just episode 1. There's more coming. So it's very revealing.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, everybody can watch that one. Now, in the meantime, Patrick,